Well, hello there. This is the Side String Pros, and we are live this Saturday, 11 o'clock. You know what that means? It's time to wake up, take your instruments and your bows out, and smell some rosin. So, basically, today, as you can see, I'm all by myself. And to be honest, I'm going to keep things very, very simple. I'm not going to do screen shares or anything like that because I just don't want it to get way too complicated. Thank you so much. I see that we already have some people watching. Hi, Adriana. Hi, Esty. Thanks for letting me know that the sound is on. As you know, last time we had a little issue where for some reason the Zoom didn't get unmuted. Just in case if you're tuning in for the first time, I'm Dr. Diana Seitz. I'm a professional classical violinist and a violin faculty at University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. And you're watching live on the Side String Pros YouTube channel, which is dedicated to anyone who loves classical music or violin playing, string playing. We post tutorials for violin, viola, cellos, and I usually host this live stream every Saturday with my daughter Esther, but she's away. She's having some fun visiting her boyfriend's family, and for a couple of weeks. Originally, we thought that we were gonna actually have her Zoom from there, but it's not going to work out. So I'm just gonna fly this solo. And I'm actually really excited about releasing the Kreutzer 4 finally this week. If you've seen it, I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, by the way, Esther says, hi everyone, I'm out of town and will miss being a part of the broadcast this week. Well, I miss you too, sweetheart. I hope you're having, but you deserve a nice little vacation, so have fun. So, oh yeah, here is my mom in Russian. Thank you, Mom. So here is what I wanted to go over this Saturday morning. I want to give you very detailed tutorial, kind of a live masterclass on the Kreutzer 4, because I feel it's such an important etude on staccato and many other things actually. It's a chock full of challenges both for the left hand and your bow arm, and so we definitely are going to go in great detail. And the reason I didn't want to just record a tutorial, because the whole point of this being a master class, even though I'm on this side, I'm all by myself, but you guys can grab your instruments, play along with me, try things out that I am suggesting, or the best part, pitch in and ask me questions, ask me what is maybe an important challenge that maybe I haven't addressed yet. That would be fantastic. Hi Carla, thanks for tuning in. Besides Kreutzer 4, we're going to also work on the fingerings of the 3-octave B flat major scale. And I will share with you two types of fingerings. The more traditional fingering that is really great, and then my favorite fingering, and I'll tell you why I like that particular fingering later on. And then finally, I can't wait for a little discussion. So I wanted to pick your brains, guys. So this is kind of an issue that has always interested me greatly. And it's about the concept of major and minor scale in classical music, of course, meaning traditional Western European classical tonal music. And then also how that concept translates into all types of different music, folk music, pop music, jazz, just name it. And I would really love to, hi Alex, thanks for tuning in. So I would really love to hear your opinions on that. Obviously, this is something, the reason this discussion is so fun, because there's no right or wrong. It's not about proving one's point. It's about sharing everyone's points about this, because music is something that reaches probably most everyone, right, in our lives. And it's become such a huge part of our lives more and more. I remember when I ran home from my school, and so I could turn on that old record on my record player, because I was in love with this record of David Oistrakh playing my favorite Tchaikovsky violin concerto. And then I remember how things started progressing, and with the advent of computers and then the internet, now music is so easily available and accessible that we all have music in our lives almost constantly. And so because of that, this issue is even more interesting, because one of the reasons that we love music is helps us to with our mood, right? It really reflects it. Sometimes you turn it on to help you make your mood better and feel better. Sometimes you turn on because you just want to kind of have something to accompany the feelings that you have at the moment. And I feel that, of course, that subject of major minor does affect our emotional perception of music, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a law. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is affected the same way. And I actually have to correct myself. I think that many of us are affected with major and minor modes in an emotional way, but it's probably not everyone and not in the same way. And so that is why I just love this concept, because I don't know about you, but as a teacher, I remember actually as a student first, some of the very first explanations to me, hi Alexis, of major and minor modes by my theory teachers did involve this little trick where you maybe play something like, yeah, and then they say, what happens if we change that D major tune into a minor tune, and we go, and of course the kids, most of us, maybe because we were already conditioned enough, or maybe because that really it does really make you feel sadder, turning into a minor mode all of a sudden. But for some unaccountable reason, it really makes a huge impression. And I have to be honest, I did use that trick on a lot of my students too, because I felt like that was the easiest path toward helping them catch that almost like auditory picture of the difference between major and minor. So anyway, but of course this is extremely simplified, and it's not necessarily true. It's just one of the impressions that this minor and major modes make on our perception of music. And of course, I think we all agree that music does affect our emotions greatly. And because of that, I'm just very interested in that particular discussion. So please let me know once we start a discussion. I would love to hear from you, and I will definitely share with you what I think about it. But right now, I see that we have a lot of people watching, and I want to start by just giving you my A. I hope you have your violins ready. Good. If not, it's okay. You can rewatch it and practice with me later. But as you know, every week we go over a 3-octave scale, a different key. And so far we went through major key signatures with sharps. So I decided why not to add a major key signature with flats. And today we're going to go over a B flat major. Now, I really love that scale, and a lot of my students remember, especially my first year students who maybe are still learning most of the scales, they probably remember that I usually give them G major scale, and then right after that B flat major. Why is that? Because as I mentioned, there is a way to finger this, a certain way that I finger that B flat major that is my favorite. And the reason I love that fingering is because it allows me to transfer that to many other key signatures. So that pattern of fingerings could actually fit every key signature on the violin, starting with B flat major and going all the way to F sharp major or G flat major, whatever you call it, until you hit the G again. But first, I will show you the more traditional fingering that I learned B flat major with. So I'm going to start. So here's my B flat. Right? And so usually I would start on B flat. first shift will be here in the third position on D. Then to the C. One more to E flat. Then A and B flat. So 4/4 on A and B flat, and then we're gonna go back the same way. We'll repeat the B flat, and then we'll do 4/4, go down to E flat with the first finger. And usually the easiest way to go down is to, at this point, to go on the fourth finger, which will bring you right to the third position, which we all so love, right? And then down to the third. So usually in my studio I add extra notes at the beginning, at the end, and when I write it out for you, you know, and post it here, you'll see that it's just to make it easy to divide into quadruplets, right? So let's go again. So now I'm going to actually add those extra notes. I'm going to add at the beginning, and then when we get down, it's going to end. This way it's just a little easier to play it 4 per bow, because that's what I'd like to do. Let's play 4 per bow if you're ready with this fingering that I just showed you. Ready? See how nice it is? So those couple of notes at the beginning and the end just round everything up so well, and it makes it much easier to divide the notes, the whole scale, into quadruplets. And by the way, if you have any questions about the fingerings, let me know. I would be very happy to answer those questions. But one of the reasons I also like this concept of adding a few notes here and there and really fitting the scale into a quadruplet pattern is because, especially at the beginning, you know, when you're just starting to study scale, is because usually that's how we see scales in music. They're somehow fit into a rhythmic pattern, into a melodic pattern, and so forth, and we usually perceive those scales within a certain rhythm or certain meter. And so I feel that when we group it like that, when we add a few notes at the beginning and the end, it allows us to start thinking of a scale, not just a random 7-note weird pattern, but it starts kind of it starts to help us think of a scale in more of a musical context that we usually see it in the music. And so that's why I really like this idea of adding a few notes to the scale so that you end up with a scale that fits the rhythmic pattern, the usual rhythmic pattern. However, I do love to practice with weird divisions such as 5 and 7 and 9 and 11. That's a great practice, but I feel like it comes in later when you're so very, very comfortable with the scale that you can do that. So now for my favorite fingering. And this is why, before I show it to you, this is why I love this fingering, because this is the fingering, and by the way, it's just about going back from the top of the scale down. That's where it changes just a little bit. But by changing that one shift, this fingering pattern becomes adaptable to virtually any scale. So starting on B flat and going through every scale up to G flat major or F sharp major, whatever you like to call it, you can actually apply that same fingering and it feels really comfortable with one minor change. But so let's do it. I'm going to play it 4 per bow, and going up I'm going to do exact same thing, but going down, instead of going on the 4th finger on the D, I'm going to go to the 3rd finger and I'm going to do 3 2 1 and then 3 2 1 again, and that way I will be in the 1st position and the rest is the same. And so as I do that, this turns this B flat major scale now into a fingering pattern that, as I said, you could apply to B major, C major, D flat major, and so on. Okay, so that's why I actually, when I have my students for the first time learn B flat major scale, that's why I have them learn this particular fingering, because then that makes it easier for them to go up and learn the following scales. Okay, so here it is. 1, 2, ready, go. And now, again, going B flat, A, G, F, E flat, and now to the 3rd finger on D. And now on A, 3rd finger, and you're in the 1st position. All right, so Carla said, I thought we were supposed to go all the way down. You're right, Carla. That's the 2nd finger. Carla is one of my students, so she knows. Yes, I drill it into them very persistently, that particular fingering. So thanks, Carla. Yes, but just so you know, the more common fingering was the 1st one. But however, the reason I do that, and that's what I want you guys to try this week. If you're working on this B flat major scale, I will post, and by the way, I know I forgot, I haven't posted the E major scale yet, which I'll post both. But I want you to try that fingering and just pick any scale up from B flat major. I would say B major, C major, D major, those are really fun to try. And then try that same fingering. You'll see how wonderfully it works, and it's very convenient. So that's it for the B flat major. Of course, Esther is not here to play my favorite 3rd scale, so we are not going to do it today. But hopefully when she comes back, we can resume that wonderful, fun tradition. Now for the Kreutzer 4, are you ready? Okay, I have my music here, and like I said, since I'm all by myself, I want to make sure I am not spread out too much, so I can keep track with your comments in case if you guys have questions. But I am really excited about being able to record this for you finally. As you might have seen, that I started Kreutzer Cram project was a year ago, and my intention was to record a Kreutzer Etude every week, but I kind of fell off the wagon. So I'm finally, excuse me, back. And basically what I'm hoping that I could actually do that, a new Kreutzer Etude every week. And then the following, in that same week, we could have that masterclass, live masterclass about the Kreutzer that I just posted. So today, Kreutzer 4. Of course, it's most famous for the staccato, right? But I've learned so many things this week that I was really going in depth into studying it. And so some of the challenges include actually rhythms. So as you know, it starts with, it has only 1 beat on the down bow and then the 3 beats on the up bow at the beginning, the 1st measure. Then you go, if you go to the 5th measure, you have, so now your down bow only gets 1 triplet eighth, which is shorter than even the normal eighth. And then the rest, you have to fit everything on your up bow. So from the bat, he is giving you a challenge of bow distribution, right? That really works into helping you to master your staccato. So why is that? One of the things that he does it, he's just being very sneaky, and it shows what a great teacher Kreutzer was, because one of the things he's making you do by bowing, by these weird bowings, is to be aware that you need to save the bow on your up bow. So basically, just by trying to execute the first measure with a decent sound on the up bow, and that especially last note that is long, he is forcing you to develop this muscle memory of saving the bow and moving very slowly with your bow on the up bow. And that, I believe, is one of the most important rules in staccato playing. So I want you guys to try with me this exercise. So we're going to take that first measure pattern and we're going to break it, just play only the rhythms on a single string. So I like the D string. And so the rhythm will be 1, 2, and the 3, 4, 1, right? And so what I want you to do, guys, we're gonna change the tempo around, but no matter what tempo, I want your goal to be to use as little bow as possible on the way up. Save your bow, especially on the separate staccato notes, right? So let's try it in this tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Again. So have you noticed how little bow I need to use on the staccato notes? Now, what if we went much slower? So let's say we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and again. Have you noticed that in spite of changing the tempo to a much slower speed, I didn't need to use more bow, which is counterintuitive, right? We think, okay, when the tempo slows down, that means every note is going to take up more bow because it's longer. Well, so this is the most important secret. Well, it's not a secret, but it might be for you still. So if you don't know this trick about practicing your staccato in a slow tempo, this is the most important thing that if that's all you hear today, I promise you it'll revolutionize your staccato practice and effectiveness of your stroke. This is the most important thing that a lot of students miss, is when if they're asked to play staccato slowly, they would do something like this. You see what I just did? So what I did, I basically filled in the most of the note with the amount of bow that I normally would any note of that length in the regular bowing. But that's the trick. Staccato is not your regular bowing, and you have to remember that. You have to treat it as a completely other weird thing. It has nothing to do with sustaining. You see, this is why it's so hard sometimes to move your staccato and get it faster, because as string players, we usually think of a sound as having the beginning, right there, then the length of the note, then the end, and then the next note begins. You see how? Because that's how we learn. We learn at a pretty slow tempo, usually at the beginning, and we usually are very conscious of sustaining the sound and the quality of our stroke. And because it's hard, because once we start the sound, we want to control it all the way through. We want to make sure that our bow we're using the right pressure, the right balance of pressure and speed and all the other things, not even mentioning the string crossings and all these other things that we need to be aware of constantly. So now think of maybe if you were a percussionist, maybe playing xylophone or maybe even a snare drum. Just think of how your perception of sound would be there. Basically, once you initiated the sound, that's it. There's nothing else you can do but wait till it's time to play the beginning of the next note or the next sound. And this is the secret of staccato. This is how you need to teach yourself to think on staccato. And the way to teach your body to understand that is by practicing in the slow tempo, but with very, very still little amount of bow on the staccato notes. It's kind of like this. I tell my students very often, so suppose you have a metronome clicking, or if you're clapping the rhythm, right? So right now I'm clapping, I'm going to clap at this tempo. So that's my first tempo. Now I'm gonna clap the next one and see what you think. If the speed you think overall changed. Oh, we got a really good, hi Jacques, great to hear from you. Yes, I will definitely talk about this in just a second. Great question. So what I just did, I clapped a rhythm and you could tell it was the same rhythm, but the first one definitely is perceived as a faster tempo than the second one. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory, but what I want you to ask yourself now, how did you perceive the slowing down the tempo? Was it because my claps suddenly became longer? No. The only thing that changed was the amount of time I allowed myself to wait between the claps. So basically what I did to slow down the tempo, I didn't have to change the original length of the note of the sounds that I was making. All I had to do is increase the amount of time that passed between the beginning of every clap. And that's the key to getting a really nice and fast staccato. So if you listened to my tutorial on Kreutzer, you've noticed that in my slow version, so this is what I did. I know I usually put the music so you can't see me, but my slow version went something like this. So and if you hear, you can tell that I'm not playing. So even by hearing, you can tell that what I was doing, my goal in slow version is just to allow more time between each of the staccato strokes, but to keep it exactly at the same length and quality of sound as I would want it to be in the fast tempo, right? And that is how you teach your muscles the proper way of playing staccato in the slow tempo. So in this case, the reason you slow down the tempo is just to give you a little more time to think and to prepare for the next note so you can relax and let your body learn the process. And then when you're speeding up, all you're doing, you're just shrinking the amount of time between the strokes, right? So I love the question from Jacques. Hey, I hope you're doing well. Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Could you explain us how to find perfect contact point? This is great. So, and this is something that took me forever to learn and discover because I was subconsciously, like inadvertently doing it and I didn't realize that I did. Because, and tell me guys if that is true. I would love to hear from you. The very first time I started learning staccato, and in fact, let me see if it's, yeah. So it's not in there. I was wondering if in comments it says the same. But I was told that you want to start at the very tip. Right? And that's true. You know, you see most of the people play staccato at the very tip, and there are many reasons for that. But I feel that at the very beginning, that thing about finding the perfect contact point actually sometimes is more about where you're playing staccato. And each person is very different. Each bow is very different. Each instrument is very different. So depending on your length of your arm, depending on how you're built physically, depending on how quickly your strings or your instrument responds, depending on how soft or hard your bow is, you're actually, the placement of where you actually play that staccato stroke can change. It doesn't have to be at the very tip. And lately, when I start teaching staccato to my students, I actually don't make them go all the way there. I kind of allow them to find a point right here. So this is what I want you guys to do. If you have your violins and your bows, I want you to just put the bow on the string anywhere, like where you're comfortable, right? And then here, I'll stand up so you can see my bow arm. So what I'm doing, I'm not moving the bow. About finding the perfect contact is, first of all, is about how well can you affect pressure. I don't like the word pressure. I like to use weight, but in this case it is pressure on your bow at any point. So you see the difference. It's much easier to do it here and much harder to do it here. So the exercise, basically the gist of the exercise, you put your bow down on the string and then try to get the stick all the way to the hair and then let it go. All the way to the hair and let it go. All the way to the hair. And I want you to feel the muscles that you're using when you're doing this, which muscles are working. So if you're not sure how to even get that nice crisp contact at the beginning, that is the first exercise you would do. And by doing this, I think you can tell how much easier it is to do it here than there. So that's number one. Your second, but that's not it. That's not only it. Another thing that's very important that didn't occur to me until much later when I started teaching is also your contact point here. You see? So that will also affect your staccato. You will feel, and everyone is different. So first you feel how different. You don't have to find anything. Just feel how much pressure it takes for you to get the stick all the way down to the hair here versus here. And you'll notice that here you can't even do that. Once you're at the very top, there's no way to get the stick to actually touch the hair here, right? No way. So, and then notice the sound you get moving toward the bridge and then away. So when you're playing a staccato, these are the two things I want you to really pay attention to. So this is how it works. If you feel that you're not getting a proper little pop on the bow, I need you to check whether you are trying to be way too far here. And if you move just a little bit, you will feel that you have to exert much less pressure on the bow to get that nice little pop. Also, the bow is more springy here, so it'll naturally spring away too, allowing you to drop right back and pop your next note. If that is okay, if you feel like you're in a comfortable part of the bow, but you still maybe you feel you're working too hard, it could be because you're trying to be maybe too close sometimes to the bridge, because you realize that the strings are much tighter by the bridge, so you have to exert ever so slightly more pressure to get that sound. Or if it's maybe you feel that it just doesn't sound brilliant enough, you might be too far down here. So I know those sound like very, very simple things, but these two things really matter. So number one, as you practice your Kreutzer or your staccato this week, I want you to really pay attention to bow placement this way, and then where actually you're getting the best and most comfortable stroke and most comfortable articulation on the bow. For me, I usually like to start, it depends on how long the passage is, and in this case, of course, you're tempted to go really, really to the very tip, right, because of the long note. But here comes the next challenge of the etude. If you would like, you don't have to go all the way to the top. You can comfortably stay in the middle of the bow as long as you can save your bow on the longer note. So you see, so I was able, by now thinking, being aware not only about just playing my staccato notes very, very short, but also by shrinking the amount of bow I'm using for the long note and lightening it up, guess what? I was able to save enough bow so that the next short note doesn't sound ugly, right? So those couple of things, obviously very important at the beginning. And that brings me to that weird down bow. Why? Why did he have to do this? Because I've seen students do the easy cop out and doing something like this, retaking, especially here. Yeah, obviously that makes sense that you don't want to use all of that bow for a very short note, but that's defeating the point of the etude. Our goal here is not just to make a nice up bow staccato and a nice beautiful long note, but then figure out, okay, how do we play that bottom note, that one separate, not bottom, the one separate note on the down bow, and use so much bow that we need to use in such a short amount of time, but make it sound good. So obviously the first couple of things that I explained will help you to at least shrink that amount of bow that you will have to use for the down bow, at least that. But on the down bow itself, the best way to play it actually is try not to sustain. Again, we're coming back to that same issue of our desire and yearning to sustain everything, because that's the first thing we learn. That's our power, right? This is the beauty of the string instrument. We can sustain sound. This is just, it's like a superpower. So in this case, you have to say goodbye to that superpower. Don't use that. So don't think of sustaining, and I'll show you the difference. So I'll go to maybe measure 4. That one, right? So suppose on the previous measure I forgot and I went all the way down to the frog. And now I have all that bow to use on the G. So this is what happens if I sustain it. Horrible. Now there is an accent there, but accent doesn't mean sustain. So here's what happens if I accent the note but I don't sustain. You see what I just did? So of course this is an exaggeration, but what I was trying to show you guys, this is how easy it becomes if you don't try to sustain that down bow note. So how do we do that? So the simplest technique, of course, I would probably play the previous measure. So somewhere here. And see, because I'm not sustaining that down bow note, now it actually sounds pretty decent, and I don't have to retake. And even if I had to go faster, it would still sound good. So he's such a good pedagogue, because what he's making you do, again, he is forcing you to think staccato articulation instead of your regular sustaining, because that's basically what you do in staccato. In staccato, you usually poke and then you just let go. You don't keep sustaining, right? So one of the ways, now there are many different ways to play staccato, but in this etude, actually this one works really well. So you poke, then you let go, and then you move really, really fast. And so I believe that, I think this might be the reason why he's giving you this weird down bow, because why not increase the amount of notes on the beats on the down bow to make it more palatable, right? Easier for us to play it nicely. I think that's why. And so when you put that together, you get, if you're guided by your ears, as I always tell my students, your ears are your guide always. The final product, does it sound beautiful? Is it pleasant to hear? Because that's what music is all about. It's about the enjoyment of whatever we're making, art that we're making with our sounds. In this case, it's the type of art where it's supposed to be pleasant. That's the whole point of it. At this particular etude, right? We're supposed to make it sound nice. So if you just guide yourself with this and to the sound and find that balance where, yes, the down bow notes, I'm able to use much faster bow and get myself to the end of the up bow quickly enough, but it still sounds nice. If you work that way, then your body will find that feeling where you can make an accent, then release, and then just move really lightly right on the surface of the string. And then that will set you up for a really good staccato, because when you're starting staccato from lighter feeling, then it's very easy to dig into the string and then start playing the staccato. So that is about finding that contact point, because when you're making an accent, what's important is not just digging in. Actually, what's most important is letting go as soon as possible. So if you want to try with me, if you put the bow right here and let it sink a little bit, and then your goal is to start moving with that pressure, but as soon as you start moving, release it immediately and go in the air, kind of like this. So I like to think of mimicking pits. It's almost like that. So your note should be just as short and the effort should be just as short as the pit's effort. And you see, if I put too much pressure, too ugly. So I can work with that. A little lighter, that's enough. Then let's see, here or here. This is better. Yeah? Then you can do the same thing on the up bow. So we call it collé stroke, right? And don't try to make them fast. It's all about just finding that balance. And so finally, the real issue in finding the perfect contact point is finding the balance between the weight and the speed of your bow. So if I just put my bow on the string and don't move it this way, what happens? Nothing happens. We're not going to have any sound. We have to move the bow. But we also forget that because we have gravity here and everything has the weight, even the bow, even if I don't put any weight of my arm, there's still some of the weight of the bow that is catching the string, right? That's why we put rosin. We want more friction, we want to catch the string better. But technically, imagine if you were playing somewhere in the outer space where there was completely no gravity zone and your bow didn't weigh anything. If you didn't add the weight of your arm, you wouldn't make any sound, even if you were moving, right? So therefore, those two forces that are very important and actually necessary to producing our sound is horizontal movement. I like to think of it as a horizontal movement, the bow speed. And then you have the weight, right? And basically finding the perfect contact point, this is one of the issues. Find the perfect speed at which you're going to take off, and then the perfect weight that you need while you're beginning the note, before you let go, before you release. And that's how you find the perfect contact with the string. The next is very important, is that where you apply the weight, the sequence of events. If you are trying to start with an accent, which that's what it is, right? Staccato is basically a series of accents and releases. So when you start it, if you want to start with that accent, you have to let the weight sink in first and then move. That's what creates, and that's important, the sequence of events. If you move first and then apply the weight, see what happens? If I apply the weight and let go but without a clear stop, then I don't get that effect of ta. Like I always like to think of it as a syllable that starts on the consonant, like ta, ta 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 ta. That would be your staccato articulation, versus something that starts on the vowel, like ha 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 ha. You see, it's a very different articulation. So to get that kind of ta 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 articulation, you do have to stop. The weight has to be applied while the bow is completely still. And so those are the important issues for the best contact point. We started, remember, just to kind of recap. So we started with the very simple. This is so simple. That's why we overlook it. Just find the place. You don't have to always start staccato all the way there. Find the place where you can easily affect, a little easier, make that effect on the stick, right? To get it to, not that you need that much, it's just an exercise to exaggerate it, right? And so sometimes it's a little bit easier here than there. And there's nothing wrong with that. Start your staccato training there. Start in the part of the bow where it comes out the best. That will encourage you. And then you can always expand up and down from there. Then don't forget, so this way, then don't forget this. This also, it's these two things. The reason I'm talking about these first, I started because they're the simplest ones. These will make such a big change that you will be even more motivated to continue work. Then next issue, when it comes to how do I make sure that eventually I can speed up my staccato, that was the next step. And remember, that was about the claps, right? When we clap, we realize that the tempo changes without us changing the length of the clap. And that's how you practice slowly. When you found that really nice placement here and here for your staccato, then you practice your staccato slowly, but you keep each staccato the same exact length and speed and energy and articulation as you would in the fast tempo, right? So yeah, so that later if I want to go faster, you see I'm doing exact same things, and my muscles are very familiar with that movement, so they are able to produce that movement quicker right next to each other, because basically for my muscles nothing is changing. The only thing that's changing is the time that passes between the two notes. And then the next, remember, don't sustain. Take that sustaining power of the violin sound out of your mind and just think of it as series of like a snare drum. You know, you hit and that's it. That's it. So think of your notes as just series of beginnings of the next notes. That's it. Like the note only has a beginning and nothing else. There's no end, there's no length to it. All you have to do is just start the next note as quickly as possible after you started the first one, right? And then finally, Jacques' question about how do I find that perfect contact point. This is the most complicated issue, and this is basically by trial and error. And what you want to, okay, let's try it. I'm going to be super heavy right now and slow. Ugh. No, I don't like it, right? We all know this is going to happen. I'm just being kind of super obvious right now. So what do? We could do both. You could speed up your bow speed at the beginning, but keep the weight the same. That worked. Or you could lighten up and still keep it kind of slow. That worked too. Or you could do both. Right? So again, the balance of weight and the bow speed. I hope that helped you guys. But there's more to that etude. So the rhythm, I highly recommend at first, if you're having a hard time, if you're technically, the temptation in this etude is to shrink the last note. And I see a lot of performances at first that without realizing it, a violinist would play actually 3/4 per measure instead of 4/4. So it sounds like this. And that actually sounds more normal, right? So I don't, but what I did right now, I basically cut off the last quarter of every measure here. And it's very hard to notice, especially if you're playing this etude for the first time. So I highly recommend, if you are just about to start learning this etude, please, 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 first forget about staccato. You can slur everything, or you can play everything separate, but make sure you are practicing with the metronome and you're figuring out the correct rhythms, right? Why all these weird rhythms? Again, I feel that Kreutzer is just such chock full of all these little tricks that Kreutzer is using to help the body understand the proper dynamics here. It's like almost he's putting you in the position where you can't help but do everything right in order to have a good staccato. So weird rhythms. I think one of the reasons he keeps switching rhythms on you is because that way you're going to have to perceive the whole thing, like those couple of beats that are staccato, that have staccato notes. You can't help it but have to see them as one thing. So you can kind of have to perceive that as one whole pattern ahead of time. So what I'm saying, for example, if I want to get from this, if I really want to switch really, really well from the quadruplets to triplets, I have to virtually, in my mind, while I'm playing that long note, switch to the triplets and virtually kind of envision that whole next passage. Right? So all of a sudden you're seeing patterns, not just one note at a time. And that's another thing that I've realized about staccato. I don't know if you guys have heard this crazy story. I never said it on the air because I'm embarrassed and I don't want you to think that I'm crazy, but I'm gonna say it today. So I was a teenager and my staccato wasn't really working very well, and I was really frustrated, and so that day I remember I came home and it was like afternoon. I was after school. I was pretty tired, but I just couldn't let go. I just kept trying and trying this Mazes 34, and I kept trying to understand why is my staccato it just sucks. It just doesn't sound good. It's not fast. It's slow, and so I practiced about a couple of hours without any success, and I got tired, so I went to take a nap. And this is like where the ridiculous part kicks in. So during that nap, I see Paganini in my dream. Seriously. So in my dream, Paganini comes to me and shows me how to play staccato, right? So I wake up and I remember that, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what did he tell me in my dream? And of course, I could not remember really, literally, I could not remember what is it exactly that in my dream I saw Paganini explain about staccato. But guess what? I started playing and immediately I got the stroke going. How crazy is that? That's a crazy story. But of course, I believe that the reason this happened is that all that stuff that I was trying to practice playing, I was working more on Mazes 34. You know, my muscles were already learning and kind of my body was adapting to it. But so when I took a nap and I was obsessed with Paganini at that age. I read so many books about him and memoirs and stuff like that about him. So, you know, naturally it kind of came to me in my dream like that, in that image of Paganini. But I really think the reason I was able to kind of synthesize that and then all of a sudden have a good staccato is because of practicing these different things like that for those couple of hours right before. And the reason I'm saying this is because I know that a lot of times we feel like, well, if I don't have a great staccato right off the bat, they say it's not going to happen. But it's not true. You can have a really good staccato. And even if not, like I always say, my favorite violinist, David Oistrakh, supposedly he said he never had staccato stroke. It didn't prevent him from being an incredible violinist. So I thought I'd throw you that crazy story. Hey, Sebastian, good morning. Thanks for tuning in. So one of the reasons, you know, I brought this up is because I think as I was working on that etude, all of a sudden, I knew it well enough. I started seeing the passages as one continuous thing. So each passage now was kind of a code, a pattern in my mind. And that's, I've noticed later when I started analyzing of what happens when I really feel my staccato works really well. That's the most important thing, is being able to perceive that whole passage kind of like right at once in your mind and see it, and virtually being aware of it as a whole thing rather than one note at a time. Because that brings me back to the beginning. Remember how I said it's very important that you don't think of every note as start, sustain, and the next note. And you see, when you start seeing each passage as a whole, kind of like the computer sees the program, you know, like when you look something on Google for something on Google, I think it just almost like fishes something out. It doesn't have to go through catalogs and things like that, because it sort of works like codes with codes, right? So that's how your brain works. And so with these passages, the more you play them and more you visualize and hear in your mind the passage as a whole, kind of like if you could play all of those notes on piano at once, right? You could, like any of those passages, you could just grab them on piano and play them at once. This is what happens in your brain. So when you think of it like that, then it becomes very easy to play your staccato faster and have a really nice and brilliant stroke, because that's what stops us, I think, from playing staccato faster, is thinking of each note at once, at a time, instead of thinking of the whole passage at once. And so finally, if you are working on this etude, these are the steps that I would work through. First of all, I would forget about the bowings. If you are comfortable playing at a slower speed with the slurs instead of staccato, that's great. So first figure out your rhythms and weird scale patterns. For example, there are a lot of scales that start, for example, a passage that starts with the G. You see, it started with the G, but it's not a G major, it's a C major. And again, and then, so a lot of scales and arpeggios that he gives here, if we just play a pattern that we assume is supposed to happen here, then you know, you'll probably end up playing a lot of wrong accidentals. So please make sure and work on that first, whether separate or slur with instead of staccato, and so that you pay full attention to all of those things, because those things are very important. So, and I'll get back to you, but I got a question. Hi Clyde, how are you? I need Paganini to visit me in my dreams. I can play Viet Thanh. No, we worked on your Viet Thanh staccato, and you did really good, you know, remember? So, and that's what we worked, actually. Clyde is working on Viet Thanh. Hi, Skyman. Thanks for tuning in. Skyman, code breaker, actually. Um, so, so actually, we were talking about this, how to group things in that long passage that goes down. And so that is very important, how you group. And this is what this basically Etude is teaching you. It's teaching you that you can group staccato differently. You can group it in quadruplets. You can group it in triplets. And I tell you what, the most uncomfortable passages here are the ones grouped in triplets, actually. Even though they're slower, those are the ones that give me the most grief. And this is one more thing, and I'm gonna end this so we can go to our little short discussion. I just love this, street crossings. So here is my little cheat. Well, it's not really a cheat, it's a tip. I hope you use it. When you get to the triplet staccato passages such as this, yeah, these are super uncomfortable, some of them. And the reason is because all of a sudden you're skipping a lot of notes because you're playing arpeggios. And you're having to do sometimes 2 string crossings in a row, like in this one. See, if I play it with an open A, I end up having string crossing and string crossing again. And so what I'm having to do this while also trying to play staccato. A very big range of movement. So I've discovered a long time ago, and I do it all the time, in cases like this, whenever I can use 4th finger, that helps me get rid of that extra, or put that next string crossing a little later. That works like a charm. So here, I'll show you. So try this with an open string, and now with the 4th finger. I guarantee you will feel so much comfortable, because now string crossing 2 notes on the new string, then string crossing 2 notes on the new string. And again, what it's about grouping. I kid you not, it's all about how you group those things within inside of each staccato. Like I said, string crossings can mess up your staccato very, very badly. And one more thing, going up this way, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you know there's a gap between the strings. So you're losing much more bow when you're going this way. If you watch where you're actually touching the next string, you'll see that there'll be at least that amount of difference, right? So if this was your G, when you drop the bow to a D, it'll be somewhere here. From the D, your A will be somewhere here, then your E. So you are actually losing bow when you're doing that up bow staccato passage, starting on the low string going up. That's frustrating. And so that's another thing why these arpeggios seem so uncomfortable, because they all go from here. Now this one is much easier to play, and tell me if it's not true. This one is so easy, it's just so comfortable. Then back to uncomfortable, very comfortable. Do you see the connection there? Again, the same thing. The reason the down bow one was so uncomfortable, because you are going up, you're losing the bow, and you're having to cross the strings very quickly in a row, and you're losing the bow. But on the way up, you're actually gaining the bow. You see? Gain the bow here, and gain the bow here. So you're basically staying in the same place, which allows you to stay very balanced. Isn't that weird? So anyway, this is all I wanted to share with you. And I feel like, it's really hard to record a tutorial because it's very difficult. Here, when I have some communication, it really helps. So I really appreciate you guys pitching in with questions. And finally, I want to pick your brain. I want to share with you that whole thing that about major and minor. I've always loved music theory, and I was studying in former Soviet Union where we started theory at the same time we started our instruments. So when I was 7, I started, learning how to play violin and piano, and I started learning theory and solfege and so forth, and later harmony. And so that kind of was very helpful for our music education, but also it created these very early connections with music theory that are always affecting. That's what I love about it. That knowledge of music theory that I received so early in life, it went hand in hand with me developing as a musician, as a violin player. And so that's why it's always there for me. It's almost like it became my subconscious language. And because of that, things like that, major, minor, all these theoretical things, they're very important for me because they do affect my performance at the very, very subconscious almost level. And so what I want to ask you guys, and I hope that you feel free, you feel good sharing, you feel comfortable sharing, but it's not about right and wrong. But do you really believe, do you feel, to which extent is it true that, number one, that, like I had a couple of questions here. So my first question to you guys is, how were you introduced to major minor modes? I was just wondering if you remember your teachers using that, trick of playing a happy tune, something that you felt was a happy tune, and changing the mode to a minor, and thus helping you realize the difference. I'm just curious if that happened to you, let me know. Or maybe if you're a teacher, have you ever done that when you introduced a minor scale to, or tried to help your students understand the difference between minor and major? Have you ever done that? Have you ever, used that example? There's nothing wrong with it. I believe it's true. There is a truth to it. And so my understanding is that, especially in classical music idiom, obviously when you go beyond this traditional tonal system that we have, tonal system is definitely very conditioned to major and minor. That is very, very easy to see. But, our relationship with music goes way beyond the traditional Western European classical, right? Tonal music. And so, for example, for me, I grew up in, former Soviet Union and Republic of Azerbaijan. I'm Armenian and half Jewish myself. So all of that Azerbaijani Armenian music, Jewish music that I heard, and all of that, it all has a very distinct kind of Middle Eastern, I would say you would call it, character, right? And in that type of music, actually, those types of music have their own scales. But a lot of times people would kind of adapt those scales to traditional instruments because we had folk music, musicians play violins and pianos, and so it was all kind of historically adapted to fit the tonal system. So in the tonal system, if you try to play most of the music that we heard that was considered happy music, you will end up playing what would be more like a minor mode. So when it came to my folk music, most of the music kind of was more related to a minor mode, if we say so. But there were a lot of really, really happy tunes, and I never felt like they were any savages because they were in minor. So that kind of helped me that was my first encounter with this idea of, does minor really make you subconsciously sad, or major makes you subconsciously happy? So, but I think it does definitely make a difference, right, in our perception, because once you change that major third, that third degree of a scale to a minor, from major to minor, it does definitely change something about the music. It does definitely impart a different kind of emotional perception to that piece, and it could be backwards. Sometimes I think maybe like Vivaldi concerto, do not feel that a minor mode makes it any sadder than it it should be. I think it's still, I perceive it still as a happy overall, like a happy kind of sounding music. Okay. Hey Esther, thanks for pitching in. I remember in elementary school music classes we always sang happy pieces in major keys. Yeah, it's totally, and not that it's wrong. And so, the more I thought about this issue, I kind of started thinking of, because I had this theory professor who was very, very serious, very into this. He was really upset about people ever signing minor as a sad, tagging minor as a sad and major as happy music. And he was totally die-hard fan of the theory that we were just conditioned. We were just conditioned by composers, by movie, makers, to think of minor as sad and major as happy. And I can't say that I disagree fully with it. There's totally a huge amount of conditioning that went in historically. We're always conditioned by something, right? But then I started thinking, everybody, you guys know about conditioning. The first thing comes to mind, the Pavlov's dog, right? If you don't know, there was this Russian scientist, Pavlov, who studied, psychology and just reflexes. And so what he did, he trained his dog. So he would, every time he gave his dog food, he'd ring the bell. And then, so it was constantly, every time that dog got food, there was a bell that was rung. And so after a while, and so he had this thing, this poor dog had the thing that stuck out of his mouth so you could see if it's salivating or not, It's kind of disgusting. But anyway, so at first, so every time after, I don't know how many, I'm not a specialist on that, but I remember that experiment. After a certain amount of time, he stopped giving him food. But every time he just rang the bell, and then without even food being there, that bell made the dog salivate, right? So this is like a classic experiment on conditioning, psychological conditioning, where you, attach something to a certain feeling or a certain function of your body, and then before you know it, that thing that has nothing to do with that function evokes a certain response from your body. And that's what technically conditioning is. But if you look at it a little bit deeper, the condition, that response of salivating to the food already existed. If it hadn't existed, then the conditioning to that little bell wouldn't really work, right? So to condition anything, you have to already work with a certain type of reaction that already exists to something. And so that's what I'm thinking. Okay, I totally agree with the fact that there is a fair amount of conditioning that was happening historically, but to think about, can you really condition something that doesn't exist at all? Like, can you really evolve? So in a way, to me, it proves that for sure, just the fact that we can be conditioned to hear minor as a sad mode and major as a happy mode proves that yes, music does definitely affect our emotions, and I think the tonal language does too. And that's why I think in the first place that conditioning was so successful. And so that's basically how I feel about this theory, whether the minor and major really are connected kind of subconsciously to our perception of the mood in the piece or emotions. But so this is something that I was hoping to hear from you guys, and I know we've been at it already for a long time, but and it's probably time to end the live stream, but I would love for you to comment later once you had time to think. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just really fun. And the reason I love to think about things like that is because that shows how diverse music is. Music is that unique thing that it brings us together, but it allows us to keep our diversity. How incredible is that? When I'm listening to someone play a piece by Bach that was written hundreds of years ago, I don't have to change myself in any way to enjoy it. If I like that piece, I can like it and prefer it and let my imagination soar along with this music any way I want to. I don't have to obey any rules. I don't have to have an interpreter to explain to me what's happening. All I have to do is enjoy it or not enjoy it, and that's it. And so, how crazy is that? And how amazing it is that at the same time of being so reachable, um, so easily accessible, music, and so diverse, it doesn't really divide us. I think diversity of music serves more to unite us. And because I was really blessed, I saw comments from all over the world on my videos recently, and I really appreciate it. And the fact is that sometimes I get comments and I kind of have to guess what they're saying because they would be in Spanish, or, well, there's some also. So, and if I can figure it out, I thank people, and, but that's the beauty of music. We are all from all over the world and we speak different languages, but music is the kind of language that speaks to our hearts without any interpretation, right? And so that's why I really, oh, we got some comments here. So Ryan says, great stream. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for tuning in. Ryan was helping us to create this really fun video concert that will be live streamed very soon. Hey, Ryan, can you, do you remember off the bat what the date is? If not, it's okay. Don't worry. I'll post the, under like the date of the live. I think it's October 16th that on UTRGV channel, Esther and I just recorded a really fun classical program. And then Alexis Varela says, imagine scary movies without music. Yes, I totally agree. You're right. And it's not a coincidence. And people who write, composers who write music for movies, amazing how well they are at timing things. If you just think of, in fact, I was watching this very old movie. It's called The Working Girl. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It has Harrison Ford in it. He was very young, and then this other actress, I'm blanking on her name, but she's very, very famous too. So, and there's this part, the person who created music for this movie, I don't remember his name, but he was a genius, or is a genius, probably he's still alive, I don't know. But that score, I tell you, the movie is pretty concise, so they don't have a lot of elaborate transitions in the plot. It kind of very clearly sectioned, which that's a charm of the movie, and it makes it very fun to watch. It's very fast, paced. But I remember there's one in the beginning. There's a scene where the main character has the plot, including the plot turns really drastically, very quickly, and that it turns because you see the main character, how her whole attitude changes. So she's there in the frame, and you can tell that she had this major breakdown and then a major breakthrough that led her to conspire to come up with this plot that finally turns the whole plot of the movie, and that's when all the action starts. And so I kid you not, I counted, it's only 8 measures of music that are there, and all you see is some scenes of literally there's you see her outside when she's thinking, like in New York, then you see the river, and then she's sitting in a completely new place where she's actually implementing her new plot. There's not a word said. Nothing is, except for beautiful scenery, like 3 scenes, just the landscape, nothing else, and the music. And it's only the music that makes you understand what just happened. It makes you understand her heartbreak, then makes you understand how she is breaking through that sadness into action, and then at the end you totally see that she's a completely changed person just with music. So if you guys can get your hands on that movie, I would love for you to see that. It's so it's called the Working Girl, and I'll put actually the timestamp for the movie so you can see it. And I would love to hear your comments. But I think it's one of the most ingenious transitions, and it took me forever to even notice that. And that's the thing about music in the movies. We take it so when it's done really well, you don't even notice it. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. So Carly Simon and oh, thank you, thank you. I Carly Simon was the composer, but someone else. Yeah, so it was Rob Monzi. Thank you so much, Ryan, for commenting. Yes, he was the one who I understand scored it. That's what it says. Yeah, and so the music itself is phenomenal. I love the opening, sequence, the track that you hear, the song, but then the way it is used in these transitions, just that score is just incredible. I'm in awe of what that composer did with Carly Simon's music. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Daryl, hi Daryl. I hope you're feeling better. You love minor keys, me too. In fact, when I was a kid, and again, I'm saying it on the air, so please don't take it out of context. But when I was like middle school age, right middle school age, I thought that I hated Mozart. I thought it was Mozart was the worst composer ever because all of the stuff that I had to play by Mozart was all in major keys. So I just hated Mozart's music literally because I thought it was the most boring music in the world. Can you imagine that? And I think now I understand because most of the pieces then that I was learning by Mozart were all in major keys. And I think with minor, there's just a little more drama. It's not about just us perceiving it's sadder. It feels like minor tends to have a little bit more drama because of the way the leading tones and all of these connections where the half steps are in the scale, where they're located, as opposed to major. I think that's what creates that more of a drama kind of feel in a minor key, and that's why I do have to admit I still just love playing minor key stuff. A lot of pieces that I play there in minor keys, I thoroughly enjoy them because of that drama. So anyway, guys, thank you so much, everyone. We had such a wonderful live stream. I really appreciate it. If you I will post links to the B flat major scale. I'll write it out, and also E major scale from last time. Like I said, if you have any more questions about Kreutzer 4, feel free to ask in the video itself or here. And also, don't forget to also check out my Mazes 34. That's the etude that I actually learned how to play staccato, that crazy story about Paganini coming in my dreams. That happened on that etude. And that etude also, it's a little different, but it also has a lot of kind of things like that are built in by Mazes to get you to the point where your body is almost forced to do the right thing on the staccato. And that's why I love those toe etudes. Thank you again. I miss you, SD. I hope you're having a really fun visit. And we'll see you guys next week. And I'll try to think of something fun to cook up for you next week. I'm planning to post another Kreutzer etude in the upcoming week. And so we'll do that same thing. We'll have a little masterclass on whichever new Kreutzer I'm going to post. If you have any kind of preference of what you'd like to go over, I would be very, very happy to do that. Let us know, and thank you so much. And I hope this inspired you to keep your instruments open and your bows rosined, and just go and practice some more today. Thank you so much. You stay well and practice on. Bye.